In this video, I want to talk about some of the basics of APA citation. Generally speaking, in the courses that I teach, if APA is required, I'm not super picky about it. I'm most concerned if it's a freshman or sophomore level course that you cite your sources. I'm less concerned with how you cite them. But in general, in fields like education and psychology, we tend to use APA. So I want to talk about citing in this particular citation style. You should already have taken a look at it if you haven't before, the first video in this series where I talk about some citation basics. I'll summarize it really quickly by saying that you have to cite your sources even when you use your own words. You have to cite a paraphrase just like you would cite a direct quote. Probably 98% of college students would never think of not citing a direct quote. But unfortunately, about 30 or 40% of college students, in my experience, don't cite paraphrases. You have to cite paraphrases just like you'd cite a direct quote. If you don't, your paper is considered plagiarized, which is a bad thing for many, many reasons. In general, it doesn't matter if you're citing something from a book, a journal, a magazine, a newspaper, or a website. If there is an author, you need to include that author in a parenthetical citation. The citation is always part of the sentence. It is at the end of the sentence before the period. I'll give an example at the end of this video. Now, this isn't the only way to do a parenthetical citation. You could put the author's name in text. So rather than having phoner here at the end of a sentence, you could begin your sentence by saying something like phoner, parentheses, 2014, discusses blah, 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 and then at the end of your paraphrase, in parentheses, put page 207. That is a really good way to do it, and it's something that I encourage you to do as you do more and more papers and more detailed papers, if that's in your future. But you have to do something, and this is sort of the minimum amount that I'm asking right here for APA format. If there is a single author, you put the author's last name, a comma, the year of publication. If it's a website and it doesn't have a date, put N period D period for no date or non-dated, a comma, and then if it's a direct quote, you definitely need a page number. If it's not a direct quote, if it's a paraphrase, the page number becomes optional. So here are two examples. These happen to be from books, but it would look the exact same thing if it were from a journal article or something else. If there are two authors, you include them by last name, space, ampersand sign, last name, comma, year, comma, P period, page number. These are two authors who happen to have the same last name. APA is different from some other formats because they use et al. For 3 or more authors. Some other citation styles only use it for 4 or more. In APA, it's used for 3 or more unless it would be confusing to the reader, in which case you can do some other way. So for example, here, this is written by Ayers. If Ayers had written something else with a bunch of authors that was different, you would want to include maybe the second author here also. That's probably not going to be an issue for the writing that you do, though, for me. Notice that some citation styles would put et al. In italics because it comes from Latin. It means et alia and others. APA does not. It's just in regular type. There is a period at the end of AL because it's an abbreviation. ET is Latin for and AL period is the abbreviation for alia or alia, ALIA, which means others. The rest of it's the same. Comma, the year of publication, comma, P period, page number. So as you're doing research, here's what you need to collect also so you can do your references page. If it's a book, you need the year of publication. If it's something like a textbook and it's been revised several times, use the most recent year only. You need the title and the subtitle. APA, like most styles, italicizes titles of books, but for the references page, only the first word of the title or the first word of the subtitle or proper nouns are capitalized. And you'll see some examples of that in a little bit. You need the name of the publisher. You used to need to know the city of the publisher, and they took that away in the most recent update. And then if it's not a first edition, you need the edition. So like something is the 3rd edition or the 4th edition, you want to include that if it's a book. If it's a journal article, a journal is a professional periodical. It's designed for a sort of an educated audience that has an interest in that particular field. Journal articles, you kind of know them if you see them. They tend to be kind of long. They're kind of dry, even if you're interested in the field sometimes. They don't have lots of pictures. They have lots of words. They might have tables and graphs in them. And they have lots and lots of citations themselves or footnotes. As opposed to a popular magazine article that might still be intended for someone who is, of course, has some education, but is intended still for a general audience. So a journal, which we tend to prefer in academic writing, you need the year of publication, you need the journal title, and again on your references page, it's similar to a book title. It's not similar to a book title. It is italicized, but here all the words other than words like and or but, conjunctions like that, prepositions like with or in, and articles like a, an, and the are capitalized. Unless, and the first word is always capitalized in a title no matter what. You need the title of the article. If there's a subtitle, include that too. Here, on the other hand, we don't capitalize other than the first word in the title, the first word in the subtitle, if there is one, and any proper nouns. Also, you don't put the title in quotation marks in your references list, although you would if you were using the title in your paper itself. You need the volume of the journal. The volume is simply which year of publication it is. And you need the number, and the number of the journal is which issue of the year it is, and you need the page numbers. So let's take a look at an example. So what I have here is the first page of a journal article that I downloaded from a database a couple of years ago as I was writing a paper. So make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So things that I would want to make sure I included if I didn't have it downloaded, things I'll need for my references. The title. Now notice here the title is capitalized, so that the main title is duality, ambiguity, and flexibility. The only thing I'm going to capitalize when I type in my references page is duality. Then the subtitle, a perceptual view of simple arithmetic. I'm only going to capitalize A. Everything else is going to be lowercase. The author's names. For APA, we always use, of course, we use last names in the paper. You never put an author's first name in the paper itself unless there's more than one author by the same last name. You would never say, oh, Eddie argues that. Eddie and Dave say. No, you would say Gray and Tall discuss. Gray and Tall believe. Gray and Tall claim. The other thing for APA is that when you're doing your references page, as we'll see, you never spell out first names or any middle names. You always use initials instead. The journal title here is the Journal for Research and Mathematics Education, and I would write that just like it's written here. That capitalization is correct. This is the 25th year that in 1994, this journal was published, and it's the second issue of the year. So that's the volume number and then the number. And then it includes the pages. It includes a stable URL. If you access an APA, a journal article from a database like JSTOR, which is a database that some colleges subscribe to, you do not need to include this. You used to need to include it. You don't now. You should include a URL if it's maybe you got it from a website of some sort, but if it's like a library database, you do not need to include the URL. You also do not need to include the date that you accessed it unless it's something you think is going to change often, which wouldn't be a journal article. If there is, though, what's called the DOI, that's something like document organization information, orientation information, I can't remember what the O stands for, is a series that's now written as a URL. You do include that. If there's a DOI, include the DOI, and we'll look at this right now. So here's another example, another one I downloaded. So name of the journal, I would put that in italics. There's my year. There's my volume number. The number after it in parentheses is the issue number. There are my page numbers. And then here is the DOI. I would include this, and you'll see what that looks like in a little bit. So just make sure if you're copying down information from somewhere that you get this information there so your citations are correct, or your reference entry rather is correct. For magazines and newspapers, it's pretty similar. You need the year, you need the date. You don't need the date for a journal. You don't need to say, oh, it's the August issue, usually, but you would for a magazine. And if there's an actual day, like if it's the August 10th issue or the December 3rd, you need that. If it's something like maybe it's 2 months in a row, like it's a magazine that comes out every other month, so it's July, August, you put both of those in. Whatever date is on the cover of the magazine or the first page of the article, you would include. Same thing for a newspaper. So you need the title of the magazine, the title of the newspaper, and then the article title. Again, the article title is not capitalized as we would normally capitalize things. It is just the first word in the title or the first word in the subtitle and any proper nouns. The title of the entire magazine or newspaper is capitalized traditionally, where every important word is capitalized. And you usually do want a URL from a magazine or a newspaper. And then finally, web pages. Please be very cautious with using web pages. When you use a website for your work in any academic course, it's important that you make sure that the website is credible, that it's not something random, that it doesn't have misleading or incorrect information on it. You really have to do some digging sometimes to see if you should really use this website or not. So as a college student, when you're doing research for a college class, your first task should not normally be to go to Google or Bing or whatever and do a search there. You should go to the library's website at your college and you should access the library databases. I think no matter where you go in North America, that college is subscribed to at least some online databases that have articles that are designed for you as a college student. You do have to be cautious with those databases because they also have articles designed for high school students or even middle school students. Those are not appropriate for you to use in college writing. So, for example, in history, the major journal in history in the US is called the American Historical Review. That is an entirely appropriate source to use. There's a magazine called History Today. That could be an appropriate source to use also. It may or may not be. It depends on what your instructor says. But there's also history magazines that are designed for young people. Those would not be appropriate. Same thing for current events. There are appropriate current event sources like major newspapers for current events. Publications like Foreign Affairs or The Economist, or even popular news magazines like Time might be acceptable. But you don't want to use something like Junior Scholastic or Time for Kids. Those would be fine for a high school class or a middle school class. But because you're in a college class, and this is true for you even if you're a high school student taking a college class, you need to use college level materials. It also might be at times that you get an article and you don't understand it. There's no shame in that. If you don't understand it, find another article. Sometimes everything is going to be a little tricky at times. And so you just find the one that you think you understand the best. But don't spend hours trying to wade through something you don't understand, especially for a journal. Lots of journals are designed for, like I said, for really sort of specialized populations. And so an article in the American Historical Review might be designed really for someone who not just has a graduate degree in history, but spends all of their spare time reading history. It's not designed for a popular audience. And so if your historical background consists of taking a couple of history classes in high school, an article in the American Historical Review might be challenging for a person like that to understand. And that's okay. My background is not strong in science. I would have a really hard time wading through a journal article in lots of, say, physics journals or biology journals. That would not be easy for me. So if you find something that is too challenging for you, that's okay. It's not designed, journal articles aren't designed for college freshmen or sophomores, or sometimes even juniors or seniors. They're designed for professionals in sort of an academia or professionals in the field. So keep that in mind. If you're going to, but having said that, still, using those library databases is a much better choice than just going on to Google and searching and seeing what you find. Now, Google can be helpful in getting background information about something, just like Wikipedia. Right? Wikipedia is a fine way to get background information, but we don't want to cite Wikipedia in a college essay, usually. Just like we don't want to cite any encyclopedia in a college essay. We don't want to cite any encyclopedia in a college essay. We don't want to cite the Encyclopedia Britannica, just like we don't want to cite Wikipedia. So but there are sometimes there's information that is useful on web pages. That's fine. Just make sure that it's reliable. Certainly, a lot of sources that you might use for current information come from places like the state's various websites or the federal government's various websites, and those, of course, would be entirely appropriate to use. There might be a nonprofit organization that's related to your research. That site might be appropriate to use. You always want to make sure what the bias of the organization is, just to be aware of it, just to sort of judge what they're saying. But those types of websites are often okay. So for a web page, you should try to find, again, the author, but sometimes an author isn't listed. I will say the less of this that's available, the less likely you should use the web page or the website. So if there's an author or authors, include that. If there's not an author, but there's a sponsoring organization like the Department of Agriculture, you'll write that instead. Again, you usually want a date. If you might have to dig a little bit for the date. It's okay to like scroll all the way down to see there's a copyright notice at the bottom and you can use that as the date. But it might be that there is not a date available. And if that's the case, use N period, D period for no date. The actual title of the web page is italicized, but the title of the website itself is not italicized unless it would be italicized for other reasons, like for being a word in a foreign language. Words in foreign languages are italicized when we write them in English. So if there was a case like that, it might be, but normally a website title isn't italicized. You need a URL, and particularly if it's a website that is missing any of this information, or if it's a site you expect to change over time, you want to put the date that you yourself accessed the website. So let's take a look at some example reference list. So for a reference list, we want the entire thing in APA format to be, whoops, let me get rid of that. I did this first for Turabian format, so there's might be some last minute edits I have to do. The entire thing is double spaced, and then every paragraph has a hanging indent. To do that in Microsoft Word, highlight it, go to either you could right click. You could also put this little button right here where my arrow is. Choose paragraph, and for special, choose hanging, and you'll get this lovely hanging indent, which is what we like to see. The entries should be alphabetized by the author's last name. Notice for this first one, in the paper itself, we use et al. For 3 or more names. In the references list, though, we include all names up to and including 20 authors. I would be shocked if you will see a paper really any time in your academic career that has more than 20 authors. I know I've never seen one like that. But sometimes they happen in some fields. Notice again, like I mentioned, that only the last names are spelled out. First names and middle names use only initials. The year comes after the authors. The year is in parentheses. And then here we have, so this was a history textbook. Notice only the first word of the title and the first word of the subtitle are capitalized. United States is also capitalized because it's a proper noun. This is the 4th edition, so that goes in parentheses just after United States. Notice how 4th is entirely on the line. When you type it in Word, you probably won't do it now that I'm trying to do it. It will sometimes do it as a superscript. Let's just do it down here. Like that. We don't like that in APA or in other citation files. So if that happens, just hit undo as soon as it goes up and it will go back down on the line. And then at the end, you need the publisher. You find the publisher from either the title page of the book or the copyright page of the book. Put the publisher's name just as it is in the book. Even if the publisher has changed, like the title has changed since they made the book, keep it that way as it appears. You can eliminate words like incorporated or corporation or company, stuff like that. You should include words like press if they're included, though. This next example is from a newspaper article. I need to get rid of that quotation mark there. So this is, again, the author's last name, first initial. For a newspaper article, we start with the year, and then after the year, we put year, comma, month, space, date. Notice that the newspaper title, the only word that capitalized here is the first word. The title of the newspaper is capitalized and is in italics. And then I include the URL afterwards. I don't want it to be highlighted though, so I'm going to right click it and click remove hyperlink, just like that. And then next we have that same last name authors. We saw that in the example, so here are their names again. Year, and again here for the textbook, only the first word, or the book, only the first word in the title and subtitle are capitalized. This is the 11th edition. It's by Cengage. Notice Wadsworth Cengage and Cengage, those are the same company. But this book, Wadsworth Cengage is what is listed, and this book, Cengage is what is listed. This next entry is a web page that I would not normally include in a paper. But I wanted to find something quickly this afternoon as I was first making this, this presentation. So this happens to be just a random website I found looking for a history topic on the Cathars, who were a religious movement in medieval France. This would not be a good site to normally use for a paper. It doesn't have an author. It doesn't have a date. Going through other pages at the site, you can discover that, oh, this is one group's group project for a history class at Kenyon College. So not a good source to typically use for a paper. But if you needed to use it for some reason, this is how it would look in your references page. Then we have an article from the magazine History Today. Because it's a magazine, we have year and then month and date. Here, the first word is capitalized, and then the Albigensian Crusade is a proper noun, so that's capitalized too. This is a website, a web page on a website, and I just chose it because it's a website I frequent, and I wanted something quick to find. So web pages are italicized in APA format for reasons that I don't quite get. And the website that they're hosted on is put in regular text like that. So the title of this particular entry on this website was 7 reasons, blah, blah, blah. The title of the website itself is 2:45. I include the URL. And I might include for this the date I accessed it. I would do that if I was concerned that it was going to go away. I know that this website has been around for about 20 years now, so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So this is probably going to stay. One thing I should do that I haven't been doing here is in APA, we do not end URLs with a period. So let me get rid of those. They do in the other format that I was working with earlier today, which is why they're still in there. So here's the entry of one of the articles that I showed you that I was using. So there's a book. We've already looked at books. Here's an entry from one of the articles I was showing you. Notice normally if there's two authors, if there's two things in a list, we don't put a comma before the and, but we do on the references page in APA format. And I don't know why they do that, but they do. So last name, comma, first and middle initial, comma, ampersand, last name, comma, first and middle initials, period, after each year, period, and then the title, first word capitalized only, first word in the subtitle capitalized only, title of the journal. So then for journals, the title of the journal, notice that every important word is capitalized. We just don't capitalize words like for or in. A comma, the volume is also italicized, and then in parentheses after the volume is the issue number of the year, comma, and then the page range. Underneath happens to be the other journal article that we looked at. Same idea. We have authors' names, last names only, first initials, the year, and then the title, journal volume, issue number for that year, and then the page range. And then this is the DOI. We always begin DOIs with this prefix if it's not already there. https://doi.org/ and then we put in what the DPI for the article is. And we end with another book. So I hope this is somewhat helpful for you. As I think I've mentioned before, on one of the other sites, a really good source is to simply use Google or some other search engine, type APA. Right now, APA is up to the 7th edition. So if you have learned APA in the past, it's changed just in the past year. New editions come out about every decade or so. So this one will probably be good until probably pretty close to 2030. It has changed quite a bit from the previous edition. It's gotten a little easier in some ways, and it's gotten a little trickier in some ways, but it's not too bad. The key thing, though, is just to remember those basics about citing. Make sure you use internal citations. Make sure that your internal citations match up with an entry in your references page, and vice versa. If something is in your references page, there should be an internal citation, at least one, in your paper itself. I'm not concerned for my classes with the overall format of the APA style, so we don't have to worry about title pages and stuff like that. You certainly will have to worry about that if you have other instructors use APA. So again, Googling APA title page, 7th edition, something like that can be very beneficial. Your college's writing center or writing lab, your college's library may also have some really good resources that you can use. And again, those are typically accessible via email or online, including in the summer. So do not hesitate. Part of the job, both of people who are like the Writing Center directors or the Success Center directors, but also the college librarians, a part of their job is helping students with reference queries. So if you need help getting an idea of what to write about, or if you need help on how to cite something, certainly going to your college's library is a really good idea. And again, almost every college now in the US and Canada for that matter subscribes to multiple databases. So there's no need to go in person. In fact, you probably won't find the number of resources in person for many things that you can find online. Now, if you go on, there are certainly some archival type things that are still only found in print or in person. But for most of what you do in your classes throughout your undergraduate careers, and certainly in your freshman and sophomore years, you are probably going to be just fine accessing things online. But always check with your instructors. Good luck as you do your research and writing. Please cite, please cite, please cite.